you'd like to contact the show, send us an email at liveonfourlegspodcast@gmail.com or get involved in the conversation on social media. Join the Pearl Jam Podcast community group on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at liveonfourlegspod.
Get comfortable, we're going to be here for a while. Sit down, and away we go.
You're listening to Live on Four Legs, the live Pearl Jam podcast experience, featuring
Mr. Stone Gossard. Fucking camera in the truck. Mr. Boom Gasper. You can call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
Hey everybody now, welcome to Live on Four Legs, a definitive live Pearl Jam podcast, and today, well, this is a pretty big week because we've decided to do something massive. Let's start from the beginning and sort of explain what we did. We did not one, but two episodes. Right now, you are listening to episode number 2 if you want to listen to it in chronological order. This would be the second one that you'd want to listen to. The first episode of this, Red Rocks 1995, famous shows, famous landmark. We put that on our Patreon account, patreon.com/liveonfourlegs, for all the patrons to listen to. If you are interested in that, head on over to Patreon. I would listen to that one first, just so you that's a good table setter right there. That kind of dip your toe into the water on what we're about to get into and what we're about to talk about. So all of you guys that are on Patreon, or if you're deciding to join Patreon right now, it's only $1. If you just want to throw in the $1 just for Red Rocks, go right for it. And I'd start with that, just because it'll kind of key you into some of the things. And you don't need it, but I know a lot of you like starting in chronological order. So I'm going to wait for you guys. This is what we're going to do. We're going to wait for you guys, and then all you got to do is pause this, go to the other episode, listen to the other episode, and right now, we'll be right back for you. So we're going to wait right here. And now you're back. See, there was as easy as that. All you had to do was just go listen to the other episode, and now you're back. And if you didn't go and listen to the episode, well, here you are. Great. We have a full episode to do on Red Rocks Night 2, and we can't wait to get to it. It's a famous show, and lots of cool, unique stuff going on, so let's not take any more time. Randy Sobel over here, John Farrar over there.
Hello.
Yo. Yeah, so we did the Night 1 episode, and we kind of recorded that before recording this, so we kind of have that under our belt a little bit. But, however, you know, there are some themes for kind of the landscape of both shows put together that make sense that we need to talk about, because the Red Rocks is a very famous venue, and it's kind of amazing that this is the only time that they were able to play there, but this really almost could be the only time that they'd be able to play.
Yeah, if you think about it, was the Ticketmaster stuff. They were looking for kind of alternative places to play and ways to get around that, so they went to some unconventional places. You know, starting a tour in Casper, Wyoming is not necessarily the way that you draw it up when you're doing the planning, but that's the way it worked out. There was supposed to be a show in Utah before this that ended up getting canceled. And, you know, a few days later in San Francisco, Ed gets sick. Everybody knows the story, or you've heard it before. Neil has to come out, help them out. Then they have to cancel dates, make up dates. Tour-wise, it was kind of a disastrous year, but the shows that we did get were unbelievable. And this one's no exception. This is an all-timer.
Yeah, and this is one of the regrets that I have of just, me being my age and me, not having the access to all the bootlegs when I did, because this would be something that I'm sure, had I been a huge fan like late 90s, early 2000s and really digging into the live catalog during this would be a well sought after show, because this felt like one that everybody was chasing on bootleg, especially night 2. Night 1, I mean, that's a pretty standard 1995 show, but night 2 is so different. And one of the things that I kind of want to address here is, if you're creating the timeline of Pearl Jam shows and kind of pinpointing as, okay, this was a change here, this is something that happened here that's really important, I feel like Red Rocks would have to be something that you need to spot out, because the way that they put together the first part of the set list, that's something that they bring back in later shows like Mansfield, the Gorge, various other shows where they would add in, at some points 8 to 9 opening tracks, just kind of as a preset that are sit-down songs. And it kind of set this precedent of, right off the bat, you're getting something special, because this show was just that.
Yeah, you could even draw a thread through, the 2016 and, the kind of the modern era where they come out for the encore and sit down and kind of do a more casual thing. Like that all goes back to this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and even more so, I think a lot of what we talked about in the Night 1 episode was just the way that the constant set list flow happened. It very much had a feel of the early 90s, where they're just going to hit you with the hardest and fastest songs. They're going to scream, they're going to get in your face for the first 13, and then after that, it's going to drop off, and they're going to get gassed a little bit. And this, when you look at even outside of just the first 6, when you look at the set list of a whole, there's more patches of songs that you can say, these are packaged together, and now we have to build it back up. And I don't think that this is the first time that they ever did something like that, but considering that this show has the weight that it does, is this one of the first ones that you can say, this is the start for them changing set lists going forward?
Yeah, that's interesting, because, we did Soldier Field too, and that's one too where they would really start to get to that. So I think you might be onto something. I think they had a lot more. You had a lot of the Vitalogy songs, which are different kinds of tempos and different kinds of, you had stuff like Tremor Christ, which is kind of a different kind of a thing. It's a thing where they kind of realize too, like they're getting older, like they're getting to be in their late 20s and 30s, and maybe we can go about doing this a little differently. And, and maybe, touring with Mike Watt and touring with Neil Young and all the stuff that they did this year maybe had an effect on them, and how Ed does these set lists, and how, we when we do those 2010 shows, we talk about the wave crests and then it breaks and then you build it back up and you get these moments scattered throughout the show perfectly. And this is a very early version of that. It does feel more like a modern show than a show from 1995, but all these 1995 shows just have a different edge to them. There's just a different feel, whether it's Jack, it's Ed, just the place they were in as a band. All of this tour just has a unique kind of edge to it that makes it really special.
Yeah, and I think perhaps it kind of all comes together by accident, because they realize at night 1 that they went too quick, too soon, and to get to songs like Black and just be totally gassed, and then just be totally gassed in the encore. I think that they realized that especially the altitude that they were in was a huge determining factor on them having to pace themselves, especially for this show, because the first thing that Ed would come out and say is, we're going to be here a while, so get comfortable. So that's sort of your key to tell you that this is going to be a pretty long show. And for 1995 standards, 26 songs, compared to the 21 they did the night before. That's pretty hefty.
I know there a couple in 94 were very long, but this would probably be up there until you get to the next year or later on with Soldier Field and then Randall's Island the next year. You got some really long stuff. But yeah, this is extended, and it's what, a 23, 20, 22 and a half, 21 and 2/2 if you're going to count some of the things main set. But yeah, it goes on for a long time.
Yeah, I haven't gone back and looked at the numbers, but I'd be very interested to see main sets up until that point that had the 22 songs in them, because that feels like a heavy number, and I would say that main sets that had encores attached to them that weren't just the whole entire set. I think that kind of sets the table nicely, and we can get into the show and let the show begin here. The band is taking the stage, and there are carpets on the stage. There are chairs. Ooh, this is a little bit different, huh? This isn't exactly Pearl Jam, but what is this? Is this Bridge School? They've done Bridge School a couple times at this point, but maybe that hasn't gotten to the head of the crowd. So what is the crowd thinking at this point? It could be anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you see how Eddie was dressed in this? He was kind of dressed like Michael Stipe in some REM music video, like in Losing My Religion or something like that. Like a dress shirt tucked in with khakis. It was like formal Ed wear. It wasn't necessarily just like a corduroy jacket or a flannel and jeans kind of deal.
Yeah, he was dressing up for the occasion. This is not just, some theater in the middle of nowhere. This is Red Rocks. It's got some history behind it. So yeah, he understands that. He knows.
Exactly. So like I mentioned before, he says, get comfortable. We're going to be here a while. And this 6-song opening to a set, and you wouldn't necessarily call it a preset because it's not like they left or anything like that. It wasn't like Mansfield, but they get right into it. And boy, right from the get-go, there are a lot of unfamiliar things within these 6 songs, and this would be one of them. Obviously not at this point. You're listening to this, you're like, Long Road, how's that unfamiliar? Well, got to go back to Casper, Wyoming, a few days before that. That was the debut of Long Road, obviously recorded while they were recording the Mirrorball stuff back in January, I believe, 1995, and this would come out way later on Merkinball. I Got Shit was played the night before, and we said on that show that was really the first showcase of it to the American crowd, because they had played it in Australia and played it in Japan a little bit. So Long Road is another one that it's just you have to consider it being a brand new original song at this point, that how many people are going to know that they played it in Casper, Wyoming a few days before that? Probably pretty close to none. Maybe there's like a 5% gauge there, but I would say not a lot of people knew what happened in Casper.
This is cool too, because you mentioned the chairs, and they come out and the chairs are really close together. It's almost like a practice or something, and Stone is just kind of leaning back, like turned to the side, like just chilling out, like way back, like I'm just gonna play my guitar.
Stone doesn't want to sit down for too long.
Yeah, he's the first one to stand up and get into it. So to have it be the second performance and to get something like this, something such like a unique performance, of it is really special. You know, they definitely held the song in high regard from the very beginning. They knew they had something.
Yeah, if you listen to this, if you just take this singular song, and if I just threw you a song and say, hey, listen to this version of Long Road, I don't think you'd be able to tell that they were sitting down, because it had a really powerful surge to it. The song felt big. It felt big for the moment, and no matter if the crowd was unfamiliar with it or not, like, they got a good reaction from it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you would think it would be kind of like more of an acoustic thing, but it's not. It's still, like I said, Stone stands up and starts getting into it, and the surge is really good, and it builds. Again, everything in 1995, they were just able to do that every time out almost, whether you want to call it Jack's influence or Ed's, but yeah, just really special performance. I mean, it's one of the coolest things to come out and to get a song like this. Yeah, if you were there, you'd be like, oh man, I don't know this, but it's amazing, and if this is their new direction, I'm in.
Yeah, and look, there's a couple different schools of thought here. It's, for Long Road, it's look at what this became, and if you're there, you're like, holy crap, this became Long Road, and this is one of their most popular openers that they have. Or, for later down the line, when we get to Falling Down in a couple of songs, it could be, wow, that's the one and only time that they've ever played it. And that's pretty incredible that they never went back to it after that point, because how many times is that? Especially for Pearl Jam, you can say one other original song has only been played once, and that would be Hitchhiker in my estimation. We have to get to the following song after Long Road, because, like I said, unfamiliar things are happening, but this at least is a little familiar. We talked about on the Night One episode how they played Jeremy, and little bits and pieces were broken apart in it, and they've kind of deconstructed Jeremy before in the past, where the intro would sound a little bit different, or they would go right into the first verse, into the second verse, they wouldn't bridge it with a chorus, and they just do different things, and they just play around with it a little bit. Well, this is just playing around with it completely differently, because it's not Jeremy at all. Technically, it's no Jeremy. It's this weird little experimental jam before Ed kind of gets into the lyrics, and once he does, that's your moment where the crowd is like, oh, okay, we know what's going on. Before that, they're just like, what are they doing? Are they just doing weird stuff all night? Well, what's going on here? It feels like a lot of people are trying to sing along and match Ed's cadence with it, but they couldn't even match that. Like, they had to just kind of take it in a little bit and either sing the song out of key or pay attention to what they're doing and just be really either weirded out or just completely entranced.
Yeah, it's that weird sense of, like, you hear the cheer of recognition from the crowd when he starts singing, like you mentioned, and they're like, okay, yeah, I know this, but the lyrics like don't really fit the music. Like I know they're playing the same chords and everything, but the music is really cool. It gets into a really cool kind of hypnotic, kind of minimalist, almost like kind of a crop rock kind of groove to it, where it's just kind of like grooving along. Then the lyrics come in on top of it, and it's just weird. And I think he realizes that and just starts talking, just speaking them to try to kind of get back into it or something. But it's awkward lyrically. Musically, I think it's fantastic. Again, Stone can't sit down.
No, he's dancing around all the
Yeah. Jack at the end is just fantastic. And, you know, this and Falling Down, of course, immortalized on the Christmas single 10-inch from, was that 2010, I think?
Yeah, sounds about right.
So 15 years later, they'd finally kind of acknowledge it and give it an official, you know, place in the canon. But they did it, 2 or 3 times, and that was it. And
I think like even 5. I think it was 5 or 6.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think it got to that much.
Yeah.
Because I remember the only time we've ever covered this on the show was Milwaukee, same year, and it even felt, listening to this, the first one, it felt like they were trying to at least stay true to the song Jeremy as much as they could. Like, at least continue the chorus to be the same way. I don't think, and I didn't go back and listen to it, and I should have, but I don't think the Milwaukee version, I thought that was completely all over the place. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I thought that one was intentionally meant to not sound like Jeremy at all.
Yeah, I don't think Stone and Mike are doing as much in that one as they are on this one. I think it's just a very basic kind of that upstroke rhythm that, from what I remember. But yeah, this one too, at the end, it almost gets too recognizable Jeremy, that, you know, like they almost break out into it. It's not exactly a full refiguring of it, but you would call it like a deconstruction is a good word. But yeah, it's so interesting, like in their history, that they would take their biggest song and tear it down and rebuild it piece by piece into this other type of thing and just play it like that. Like, you know, like, oh, fuck it, we'll just play it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll go back. That's pure 1995. Like, they were taking risks, they were experimenting, like all these improvs every show, and to play it like the second one, like you think like, okay, we'll save that for like an encore when we've already gotten people warmed up and people know, and like we're already kind of got the crowd behind us. But no, we're just gonna play it second, and people will figure it out. They're either gonna follow along or they won't.
Yeah, and what's interesting here is that at one point you can kind of see the look on Ed's face, and he's just kind of looking out into the crowd. And I think he's looking for some sort of response. He's either saying, do they get it? Do they not get it? And I'm not sure if he's satisfied or not. I'm not sure what he's thinking at that moment.
I would probably think he wasn't. Yeah.
Right.
Because like
he wasn't satisfied with a lot of things at that time.
Yeah. And especially hearing the big cheer once the lyrics start, he's like, oh, well, that's just what they want.
Yeah, right.
They don't care about how we play it. They just want to sing the lyrics that they heard on MTV.
It's not art to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, look, I think looking back on it 26 years later, we can kind of say that this is something that's really part of this time period, an important part of this time period. Like you said, they took a song that was massively popular and they completely rewrote the rule book on it. And almost every song, you could say, is almost up for that challenge, because they've done it with Porch, they've done it with Corduroy, they've done it with Better Man, they've done it with a whole mess of a lot of songs that are popular, that are known for being played a certain way, and they've always decided to take a chance. And that's one of the really cool and unique things about them, is that they're never satisfied with something, and even if it might sound like shit, they're just going to go for it. So I have full amount of respect for that. Full amount. So
absolutely.
All right. Obviously, he says we're making the stuff as we go along. We got all fucking night. It's going to be like the Grateful Dead or something. And that's a interesting little foretelling, knowing that Soldier Field is only a couple weeks away.
That's right.
Says we're going to borrow a song from a guy named Nick Cave. He's in London, probably sleeping, so he'll never know. and they play a song called Ship Song, and this is an OTOTO song as well as I should say, as well as the next song that we're gonna do in just a little bit. But Nick Cave is very interesting. He's kind of one of these singers, I put him in the same boat as Tom Waits a little bit, who, you know, maybe doesn't get the recognition for how good of a songwriter he could be. You know, but a lot of people that you ask that are like skilled, known musicians and skilled, known lyricists would put both of them in the category of somebody like a Leonard Cohen. He can come off as an afterthought because maybe his style isn't as palatable for all audiences. But I think you're more familiar with Nick Cave than I am, so I'll let you speak on it a little more than me.
Yeah, you know, I've never done, like, I'm a fan. Like, I remember, you know, he kind of had a minor hit in the mid-90s he did an album called Murder Ballads. They covered Stagger Lee, which is kind of a famous murder ballad. It got some play a little bit, and you would hear it on like 120 minutes and stuff like that. And his voice is just so, like, it just grabs you. Like, he's got such a powerful voice. And it's just a very unique sound that he has, a lot, like, very similar to Tom Waits. That's actually a really good comparison. But yeah, he goes back to the early 80s. He was in a band called The Birthday Party in Australia, which is one of the earliest kind of alternative, weird punk rock bands. Like, not punk rock that you think of like Southern California punk rock, but like Butthole Surfers, weird, you know, fucked up punk rock. And yeah, went on to has this whole kind of career as like he's gone on to be this kind of crooner using this amazing voice that he has. Yeah, he just put out an album a couple of years ago that's one of the best he's ever done. He's kind of a songwriter. Like, it's another one of those things where, like, you might not be familiar with him, but the people that you like are. And he's very influential. And yeah, this Ship Song is one of my favorites of his. It might be my favorite song. Like, I love the melody. I love the way he sings it. And I really wish that Pearl Jam had been able to get through the whole thing, because they kind of like, they get through kind of the first verse and the chorus, and then it kind of falls apart. And Ed says, oh, you know, it sounded better backstage. So, you know, they just kind of like worked it up real quick and tried to get through it.
Come sail your ships around me and burn your bridges down. We're the street, baby, every time you come around. Come loose your dogs upon me and let your hair hang down. You're a little mystery to me every time we come around. We talked about it all night long. We laid on the ground. But when you walk into your arms, I'm strong and loud. Don't lose your ships on me and burn your bridges down. Well, we need to work that one out a little better before we play.
It's just another example of Ed finding these little gems that not a lot of like mainstream major label, you know, biggest band in the world bands would think to cover. It's another example of him digging something up and trying to give it a platform and give it a bigger audience. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, there have been countless songwriters, bands that you can say that over the last 30 years that Ed has brought to the forefront, brought to people's attention. Whether or not a band like Fugazi wanted it, he made sure the world knew about Fugazi.
Right.
Whether or not somebody like a Nick Cave or The Laws that would come up later in 2000, or even That Dog, like, that would be another example of that, just putting more attention on somebody that is kind of on the lower end of the spectrum that maybe deserves it a little bit more. So yeah, it's an interesting tactic, and you know, gotta appreciate his appreciation for all things music.
It reminds me of that quote in Hype that he says. It's like, people already know about our band. Go find other bands.
Sure.
Like, yeah, that's always been his mentality.
Yep. As he mentions that it sounded good backstage and you got to make sure not to tell Nick what we did. We get a B-side after this, which is Footsteps. And look, it kind of feels like Ed says, let's try this, which makes me think that they're just making this up as they go along, which is even more amazing and kind of goes into more the allure of what this performance piece is. And Footsteps is still considered a pretty rare track, especially live at the time. It's only been played 28 times to this point. And when you think of the sit-down performances, and when you think of all the shows where they've done something like this, Footsteps is probably the one consistent song that comes up almost every single time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, ever since that Rockline performance. And, and again, it's interesting because there's not a studio version of this song.
Right.
Like we mentioned every time, like that the version you get on the B-sides and on Lost Dogs is that version that they recorded live on Rockline.
Which you could have fooled everybody.
Yeah. But oh my god, this is so good with Jack and the feel of it, and there's we're pre-harmonica at this point, so it's got a little different edge to it. It's not that kind of campfire feel that Footsteps has now, and just a fantastic performance. I mean, it's one of the best Footsteps I've heard in a long time.
Yeah, I think it's important for the song's history and the song's evolution because a lot of the performances from Footsteps that are notable come from Bridge School shows, that come from Mansfield. The song, as we talked about in the Evolution episode, is ever-changing, and I think it's definitely part of that change, that they were able to kind of utilize this song as one of the sit-down versions instead of, having to find a spot for it, because they always had a difficult time trying to fit it in when it wasn't a Mama San or a reverse Mama San or something like that. Wasn't an encore in the early 90s sometimes, but it was tougher to fit in. When you did special stuff like this, it was easier to make Footsteps stand out, and that's what they did here perfectly. So, all right, I think this is probably the biggest talking point of the episode, and it has to be one of the, if not the ultimately most rare Pearl Jam song in their entire catalog, because like I mentioned before, this is it. This is the only version that you have ever heard of Falling Down. And yes, maybe the Rockfords did a version called Distress, and it has the same melody, it's the same song, but it's kind of like, putting Footsteps next to Times of Trouble. It's the same deal as that. So Falling Down in no other way, shape, or form has ever been played. So just enjoy a couple minutes of this. We're going to give this to you right here. let's not take for granted how important this is. Obviously, it's the only version, and the big question here is why. They demoed this, made some attempts to record it during no code, and apparently it didn't work. So
during yield as well, it was brought back for yield too.
Yeah, so let's start there. Why do you think that this was just a one and done and never even touched upon again?
2 words. Ed Vedder.
That he didn't like the song?
I don't think he was happy with it. You see in this, like, there are a couple of times when he kind of fumbles over the lyrics, like he's doing that kind of mumbling thing that he does. And I just don't think he ever nailed it down to his satisfaction. You know, he wants it to be perfect, and he's one where the rest of the band can be like, hey, that was great. And he'd be like, I don't think it was quite there. You know, you think of something like Of the Earth. You know, same thing, like, for the love of God, why have we not gotten Of the Earth on a record? It's because of it. And this, I think, fell victim to the same thing, where he just never felt confident enough in his performance, or didn't feel good that he had quite nailed down the lyrics or the meaning or the theme. That, I mean, this is just me kind of putting it out there. I don't know for sure, but my guess would be that he never thought that he nailed down a perfect version of it.
Here's another thing that's interesting about this. They don't have a song anything like this at the time. This is completely different than anything else that they've done. It sounds a little bit like River Seat, the way that River Seat is kind of composed.
Okay.
Because it's a Mike song. They're both Mike songs, so...
Yeah. It sounds to me like it's almost got like the best parts of Long Road and the best parts of I Got Shit together. It sounds a lot like some kind of conglomeration of those, like, because it gets quiet just like Long Road, but it's got the soaring part just like I Got Shit. It sounds a lot like it could have been like, if you put this on the Merkin Ball, if you're going to throw an extra song on Merkin Ball, this would have fit perfectly in between those two.
Yeah, I can see that. I haven't thought about that before. That's an interesting point. I'm more thinking like this is kind of the introduction into what the no-code era would be like. Songs from no code would have more of this progression. You know, you'd get songs like Present Tense that would, you know, kind of start off softer and then kind of build into something, you know, sometimes you could say the same thing with as well. And it's just interesting that this was done at this time, and especially that they wouldn't even go back to it, that they would continue to use this template. Because when I think of songs that sort of follow in this footsteps, I kind of think that Fatal sort of kind of has the same vibe to it. To say that it's kind of the precursor for no code, but then not be on the record at all, it's surprising, but then again, it's almost not surprising at all, because it's the way that they're experimenting and saying, well, this style can work, but maybe not this specific song is going to be for us.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's because, you know, they had that break in between the Australian tour and this U.S. leg, and they were probably doing a lot of writing in that time, you know, getting in with Jack and working on stuff. And a lot of times it's the early ones that fall victim when it comes down to nailing down, you know, what's going to be on the album. It's the early ones that you're kind of like, don't know if I like that one anymore. Let's go with this newer one. That's just the way bands are, and that's the way songwriters are. And, you know, I always go back to the, you know, if you mentioned Patreon earlier, we have the other night of this up there. If you're on Patreon, if you're thinking about it, we did a whole thing on the, like, what would a lost 1995 Pearl Jam album be like. And this had a very prominent position in that. So if you want to hear us talk about that, that's another reason to go drop $1 and go listen to that and check it out, because it's really good. And it's the beginning of no code. It's kind of a step up in the songwriting, you know, with Jack and everything. But I always think of this with Long Road and I Got Shit. It always kind of falls into that, like, stuck in this 1995 kind of era. And how has this not leaked? Like one of these versions from Yield or No Code, like the amount of money that I would pay to hear that is ridiculous.
Yeah, this seems pretty locked up and pretty secure, it seems. I'm just going to throw this out there. One and only time. They never go back to it for shits and giggles kind of thing, because they have done that before.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of songs that you can really say that are completely out of the question. Is this one of them?
Yeah. If they were going to do it, they would have done it after 2010 when the Christmas single came out. They would have done it on that tour in 2011 and like worked it out. But once the Rockfords did it, that was the end. Like that was Mike saying, "Okay, this one's done. This melody's too good. I'm gonna use it for something else." And yeah,
That's fair.
we've gotten 2 OTOTOs in the first 5 songs. So
How amazing is that?
Yeah. Plus another thing that was only done a few times. So we are in for it on this one.
We sure are. And we got one more left to go in the top 6. And that's Better Man, which is still in its infancy. It's one of the lesser played songs off the Vitalogy record. And at this point, it had become a radio hit. And, maybe to them it felt necessary to start playing it a little bit more. But maybe there was a little bit of discomfort playing it because they got the sense that once you pluck the first chord, everybody's going to react to it and sing along. And this is still a very personal song to Ed. The Night 1 episode that we did, this was the penultimate song in the show, I believe. And it just didn't have a bite to it. But I thought this version had way more excitement. I thought that Jack this was a good transition into what you would get in, when they start standing up during the next song. This would kind of feel a little bit more powerful, a little bit more energetic, and have a little bit more life to it than the other version. Jack is just shaking and moving his body like a superhuman. It's a really good way to cap off this little section that they have and then say, all right, now it's time to go. Now it's time to really get into this stuff.
Right. It kind of serves the purpose of like a Given to Fly or something you think of in an encore, like when you're getting out of that sit-down section in the encore and you're transitioning to more of like, okay, we're going to get back into the rockers now. Like, yeah, it serves that purpose very well. It's not something where we get indifference later on here last, but if you did something like that here, then you're just kind of keeping everybody down. You need something that's going to build up to that electric, the punk rock section, get starting in with the next one when everybody's electric and standing up and going nuts. But yeah, this is it's an interesting spot for Better Man, having to follow everything that came before. But yeah, like I said, you get a little bit of crowd stuff where like he's starting to notice like, okay, like this is going to be something, and it gets kind of a featured spot here at the end of this little sit down section. It's really cool.
Yep. And, within these 6 songs, it's obviously the most known. And with, really 3 of these 6 people probably being completely unfamiliar with, it's good to get something that the crowd is going to be like, okay, let's get up for this. And then we can get into the Last Exits and Spin the Black Circles and Animals of the World. That's going to work for you. I think that was well done. We talked about Setlist Flow before. That's part of that. And, I think that this set, from just the standpoint of construction, is very well done, where we see right from Better Man, okay, let's get into it. I just said it. Last Exit, Spin the Black Circle, Animal. Last Exit from Night 1 was incredible. It had shattering vocals on it, but they couldn't keep up that pace the entire night. It doesn't feel like he's holding off, but he's waiting for that moment where he can belt out and get that big scream in. He's not screaming and using all of his vigor for the whole entire song, but he's waiting for that moment. And I thought that was very interesting. Like, these songs are just as intense as the night before, but they have a little bit more control to them, which is it's interesting in my eyes, because that shows that they're more prepared to play a full set.
Yeah, I think the altitude definitely had something to do with that as well. Don't get me wrong, Last Exit is still very good. Like, I just love hearing Jack on these. It's just so different and so unique. Like, you can tell instantly the way that he does the fills in the song, the way that he approaches the rhythm of these songs. It's just so different than what Dave A and Dave K were doing, that it just, these Vitalogy songs, they take on like a new life with him. And I can only picture them like running through these and being like, okay, yep. I absolutely love there's almost not a damn thing wrong with this entire show. Like, every song I could just be like, it was one of the best. Every song, like, sometimes mention like, oh, this song jumped out, or this song, every song on this jumps out as being fantastic. They're just on such a high. Like, you think of the combination of the venue, the combination of the excitement of knowing you're going to play some stuff that you've never done before, you're going to play some new songs, the knowing that it's going to be this intimate crowd, and like everything just comes together, all these intangibles to make a really special show. And the beginning of this, getting the first two from Vitalogy, Last Exit, Spin the Black Circle, it's perfect. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I think we need to mention for Spin the Black Circle, I think we need to mention that we don't get any crooked arm part, which is kind of crazy. Stone just kind of keeps riffing on the bridge and kind of overdoes it. And I wonder if it's just them kind of being in the moment and sort of feeling it and kind of vibing off what Stone's doing, kind of vibing off what Jack's doing. And they just run right back into the chorus, which I don't think I've ever heard them done that before. Yeah. So that was very, very cool. The ending to Spin the Black Circle is nuts, with Ed holding the mic stand up above his head. Like, very intense version where Ed is crouching over the mic. It looks like at points. He does this a couple times during the show, but especially during Spin, where he looks like he's vomiting into the mic. And it's that intense. But like Animal too, I can't not mention Animal in the show.
It's great.
It's great how fantastic the solo was. Right. And, again, Ed's not completely vigorous with his vocal shredding, but it's, again, understanding the environment and building to the moments where he is able to get that one big belt out, and it's pretty perfect. It's fantastic. I have I loved every bit of it. They're two completely different shows, which is amazing for 1995, and I think it just shows a major sign of maturity.
Yeah, and they show a lot of times the camera's focused on it, but you'll see Mike and he's just going nuts, and Jeff is going all over the place, and Stone is doing his thing over there that we come to know and love, and they're firing on all cylinders. They are a force to be reckoned with on stage, coming off of everything they've been doing the last 5 years. This is just perfect. It's, like I said, it's the culmination of everything from this year and the past year, and Jack and everything coming together, and every song is fantastic. I apologize that I'm going to sound like a broken record, but we're going to get to some here in the next few that are just as good as everything that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, I think my next point that I'm going to bring up is just going from Animal into Tremor Christ and being able to break up sort of the sections here, and Tremor Christ kind of be used as sort of a different transition, which again wasn't done the night before. It's Tremor Christ into the Corduroy Not For You combination that we did get the night before. So yeah, there are definitely some things that are the same in the set, but it's differentiated enough where you feel like if you've gone to both shows, you can come out of it saying, whoa, did we get every song from all three albums? It kind of had that feel to it. But Tremor Christ versions with Jack are always going to be fantastic. How he's hovering over the toms, and he's just, tribal sounding and keeping the same momentum, waiting for the burst, like fantastic stuff. And Ed makes a quip during that. Winded was the sailor, the singer, and I think that's kind of another nod to the altitude there. Definitely. But Corduroy is a little bit different from this version and the night before. The night before had a longer intro. Ed's guitar tone sounded a little bit different in the intro to Corduroy. I don't know if you noticed that, but it kind of sounded a little tingy or something like that.
He had like a fuzz box or something. It's almost like it's like a Mudhoney song or something. They're famous for using that like super distorted, like fuzzed out guitar, and he was definitely doing that in the intro. Yeah, it's just this year, these shows, everything just is on edge a little bit. You can chalk it up to the Ticketmaster stuff, everything they were going through, but combined with all that, this Corduroy is one of the best.
A real subtle lyric change in there. Everything will change instead of everything has changed. It just does such a good job of controlling the surges here. And
Stone at the end.
The little melodic piece by Stone is just beautiful. Absolutely. I don't think I've ever heard anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Mike comes in and takes over.
Right.
And you get that
fantastic solo from Mike.
Oh my God. You get that kind of iconic 1995 shot of Ed where he's just looking up, playing guitar, like he's just in the moment completely. Again, great versions of Corduroy out there, but this one is up there. It's really special.
Not For You following up with Corduroy 2 is again, like, loose, yet still has that real power behind it. And you get kind of that rise that you go back into the final chorus where it, in that little verse before that, they just kind of lay off of it and then build right back into a really big ending. And then the quiet kind of outro on it. Oh, man.
Yeah.
They're in a groove. They're in a real groove at this point.
I literally wrote that Not For You made me speechless. Like, I'm just watching this, like, just all you can do is just go, wow. Like, that's where they were as a band at this point.
One of the best. One of the best eras that this band has, especially this early on in the 90s. I don't think it's even close, to be honest with you. I think
this might be my favorite year of shows.
Yeah.
Of bootlegs to go back and listen to. Like, I'm just speechless because it's so good. Like, I was watching it and I was just blown away. Especially, you know, this back-to-back punch of Corduroy and Not For You. And it was good on the night before that we talked about for the patrons. But this one was on another level. Just unbelievable performances. Some of the best.
I still remember. Why don't you? This is not for you. This is not for you. This is not for you. Never was for you. Fuck you. This is not for you. Never for you. This is not for you. Never was for you.
So we get out of some Vitalogy songs and we mess around with some verses and some single songs, and then we'll get it into a little bit of 10 that really we hadn't gotten into because you can't really say that version of Jeremy was really the 10 version. So we haven't really gotten to 10 songs yet. So Go, State of Love and Trust is how they follow up on the section above. And Go is what kicked off night one, and it's kind of almost the kickoff to the middle of the section here. Again, the set's been broken down into pieces, and it flows so much better than the night before. They're finding the ebbs, they're finding the flows, and everything seems to work. And even Ed, it looks like during Go, he's having like a conniption on stage or something. Like, great stage performance. It's just really entertaining to watch. State of Love and Trust was supposed to be played the first night. It was held off, even though it was on the set. But they kind of play around with the intro a little bit on it. It's not one of those songs that usually they play around with it all, but like it sort of, after the beginning chords, he starts singing the lyrics to it instead of kind of letting that verse kind of breathe. But one of the things we mentioned, I think probably the last time we did a 1995 version of State of Love and Trust, is that Jack's spin on it is so different, because he does that, I think you called it the no effects beat, and he goes back to this.
Yeah, the cut time. Yeah.
Right. I don't think Jack is ever going to be my pick for State of Love and Trust, but it is interesting to see the way that they went about it.
Right. This is a weird one. I'm almost like surprised that they were playing it around this time, because you think of Breath, and like, Breath wasn't played at all in 1995, not till it didn't come back till 98, and it's almost strange that they chose this one to come back and keep up with, because they played it fairly regularly around
enough.
It stayed around, and it's weird that Jack was doing something so different, and they just were like, okay, keep going, man, do your thing. Right. Not like, maybe that's not working, maybe you need to consider that. Like, it's just like, okay, yeah, cool, man, do it.
Right.
And it's almost one that, like, by this time, you mentioned we got Jeremy, but it's not really Jeremy, so we hadn't gotten there hasn't really been a song off of 10. And they were kind of falling out with those songs. Like, a lot of them had dropped off. We're going to talk about, again, all these teases. We're going to talk about one in a minute that was one of the final ones the final one of the decade, basically. Kind of strange, but it's unique in that, it's got Jack on it. But State of Love and Trust is a little weird for this time. Like, it's cool, it's interesting, unique, it's not bad. It's just like, it's kind of like, they did that one? Okay, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think there are a couple songs that are like that. Once from Jack era is kind of weird to me. It's always been a little bit weird to me, but they never really let go of Once. And then, even a song like Why Go, which they played very, very early on in 1995 and then dropped. I think that one, you can tell they were like, all right, I think this isn't really a Jack song. This isn't really an Us song anymore. And I think they saw it with other ones as well. I think we're going to talk about one in just a little bit, but we got to talk about Daughter before that. So Daughter, we're seeing the differences between the two back-to-back shows here, and the momentum swings. And Daughter, in this spot, unlike the night before, can feel like it's more of a highlight, can get more of a moment. You even get a callback to the original here. How about that? Don't Call Me Brother. Some people had the first ever Bridge School bootleg, or even probably the New Year's Eve bootleg. I think it was still Brother at that point, but not a lot of people knew about that, so that's a very, very subtle reference to throw in there. And the tag in there is This Boy by That Dog, and this boy is referring to actually Ed. You want to talk about the story about that?
Yeah, so That Dog was kind of an alternative, kind of fuzz pop, Weezer-ish kind of band. They were in that kind of LA scene. It's the Hayden sisters, Petra and Rachel Hayden, I think. Fantastic, talented musicians in their own right, absolutely. And I think Anna Waronker, who is fantastic as well. Her brother Joey is a famous drummer. I think he's done a bunch of session stuff for he's been in a ton of different bands. But Yeah, this song was on their album, and it's written, like I said, written about Ed, and then the hook is like, what's all the fuss about this boy? So he takes that and go, oh, you wrote this song about me, saying like, you know, what's the big deal? Why is everybody making such a big deal about me? Like, I agree,
Sure,
so I'm going to
agrees,
sing
yeah.
this song.
Exactly.
And yeah, this is the first time they ever do it.
Yep, and I think more people would recognize it from the Soldier Field show where they tagged it as well. They've only tagged it 3 times, so it's really stuck in the 1995 era, kind of like some of those other ones we talked about.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I think it's great to go back and just kind of look at the eras, and if we had to do some kind of tag evolution or something like that and say, well, you know, this is when they started messing around with this kind of music, we can get an insight as to what they were listening to at the time and what was influencing them, and maybe make a deeper connection through what kind of music they were writing at the time. So.
And it fits in perfectly with him, you know, trying to get out of the spotlight and trying to be a little bit more faceless. Like, again, the song doesn't reference him by name. We only know that because, you know, the members of That Dog have said that it's about him. And it's a weird, if you go listen to the That Dog version, it's a weird song. Like, it's kind of gets into this chaotic part where it's just like just noise, and then it goes back to that. It's a strange song. It's not a pop song for sure. And he just picked this out and was like, yeah, this I feel this 100%. So yeah, this is really cool. Again, fantastic.
And a little bit of improving at the end, something about a tired, grumpy old man. I'm not sure what that's a reference to, but look, if it's on Ed's mind, it must mean something. So.
I looked it up as much as I could, tried to find out what it was. I couldn't find anything, so yeah, I think it's just an improv.
Yeah, it's probably absolutely nothing.
Like Mama said, old man, my friend.
Yeah. No idea. No idea. So, all right. Well, we're about to get into the 10 stuff here. So he asked everybody if they were there last night, and everybody says, yeah. And he says, everyone was there last night? Well, I feel like a rerun then. And they play a song that they didn't play the night before, which is Garden. And I was starting to go through my head, go through the 2 shows, and pick out the 10 songs that they didn't play at all. Once, Why Go, Oceans, Release, and Deep.
Yeah.
So I think that was either 5 or 6.
A little surprising they didn't do Release one of these nights. That's interesting.
Right. Yeah, I think the first night they probably just wanted to go out balls to the wall right away, and you're not going to play Release after the opening song in most cases around this time. So, but Garden is the one that gets the call, which is very interesting. Really, after this, Garden would become lost in the live rotation.
This was the last time it got played in the 90s.
Right, and Jack never really had much of an impact on it when he was with the band. I thought that it was kind of stuck back in 1992. It sounds better in 1992, and Mike's solo, where in that era it gets overpowering, and he can sometimes maybe do some finger tapping, or it can get screechy and really kind of, you know, pop you out of your seat. This is just very soulful and bluesy. He keeps it moody in this, and you know, I think that they kind of knew that this one wouldn't really last too much longer at this time. I think you can kind of see it, and with Jack, they had only played it 4 times. Once at the Moor, and that was one of the Piss Bottle Men shows, and then in Australia and New Zealand, and then here. So that's it. You'd have to go back to 2000 in Dublin, where they would play it for the first time with Matt Cameron.
And when it finally came back, and yeah, it's on the more like you mentioned the bluesy feel to it. It's more of like their Zeppelin side, like their 70s, you know, heavy blues rock side, and they were not in that mode in 1995, 1996, 1998. So. Not surprising that this did not stick around.
No, but definitely set for there. But definitely interesting that, you know, out of the 4 versions, we have gotten half of them. So once we get to those other shows, that I'm sure they're tougher to get boots for, that Australia and New Zealand show. We don't know when we'll get to those, but this might be the last time we covered Garden with Jack in a long time. So
yeah.
In between songs, Ed is kind of pondering his next move before getting into a live, and he decides to do a little a cappella of a Beatles song called I've Just Seen a Face.
I just seen a face, I can't forget the time or place where we just met. She's just the girl from me. I want all the world to see we've met. Da 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 da. Had it been another day, I might have looked the other way, and I'd have never been aware. But as it is, I'll dream of her tonight. Da 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 da. Falling, yes I'm falling, and she keeps calling me back again. Falling, yes I'm falling, and she keeps calling me back again.
It's a cute couple second thing, and, you know, it's sort of a breather. The band has kind of been screaming their lungs out a little bit the last two nights. It's really the most unexpected thing that they could do. However, they've done so many unexpected things at this show that, okay, this makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
It does. And the third OTOTO of the night, they'd never go back to this. But yeah, it's almost like I couldn't tell like a guitar change or someone was tuning and Ed's just walking around and this just comes to him. Like maybe he heard it on the radio or something, or heard something and just goes off. It's just a cappella. But yeah, like again, just throwing in like one of those, and this is an early Beatles one, I think too, like more of their
Help. I think this was on either Help or Hard Day's Night, one of those.
Mm-hmm. More of like the Mop Top era Beatles ones, and yeah, just it's just cool to see him just kind of like off the cuff, like in between these two heavy songs, just throw in this like little light 60s Beatles number. It was just probably in his head.
It's not uncommon, and it makes for a cool little moment, and definitely something that the crowd appreciated. But that gets us into a live, and you know, the night before, I have to reference the night before again on this one, Ed takes a little bit of issue with this song, saying sometimes it's a little bit weird to sing this. However, it seems like in this version he's a little bit more into it, or is at least faking it for the camera. Once again, the crowd is loving this, hands in the air, singing along. And Ed even kind of embellishes the line, "Is there something wrong?" She said, "Of course there is, you fucking jerk." Like, you know, it feels more of a powerful presence than the last one might have been. Seemed like a little bit more of a downer, that Ed wasn't into it as much. You can kind of sense that maybe there is a little bit disinterest, but, you know, look, Mike is kind of doing something pretty uncharted territory at the time, kind of goes off to the side of the stage, and you know, that's something very common that we get now, but he goes all the way to his side of the stage and starts playing towards there, and I thought that was pretty cool, and that's foretelling in a lot of ways. But you know, again, it's interesting that the night before, completely different take, and then I kind of see it as like, okay, put on a little bit of a show for the cameras a little bit on this one, and just kind of suck it up and do it.
Yeah, and I wonder if they talked about it. And I would, like, you know, if Stone, like, or Jeff, like, the next day was like, "Hey, man, like, what's up? Like, why'd you say that? Like, we got to play that song. Like, that's people love that song. It's important. We got to keep playing." I wonder if there was any sort of, like, motion, if it was mentioned at all. And again, that's just me hypothesizing, but it's odd that they would play it the next night after him saying something like that. So I wonder if there was some sort of compromise made around the song, because it could have easily disappeared after that.
Yeah, and I think because of that reason, because it's such a prominent song, and it's one that pretty much put him on the map, and you know, if you relate any 5 songs to Pearl Jam, this would be one of the top 2 that you would instantly say. Although they're trying to get away from it, they still have this sense of that they have to kind of cater to the hits a little bit. They're not like, you know, 10 years later they could do whatever the fuck they wanted and get away with it. I don't think they could get away with it at this point, you know? Like, even like a couple days later, like you mentioned, the San Francisco show, like Neil Young coming out to play with them, the crowd almost rioted.
Yeah.
imagine not getting, because Even Flow wasn't played this night, imagine not getting a live and Even Flow at a show in 1995 and not getting an actual version of Jeremy either. Imagine that.
Yeah, that's not where they were at.
No. But again, like, it kind of makes the Vitalogy stuff and makes the stuff that they are more into more interesting here. And, a lot, look, we could talk about a live for Dave's and we'll have better versions of it and more interesting versions of it, but it is interesting to bring up where they were with the song at the time. So
yeah, and it's weird to hear it just in the middle of this set. Like,
well, I was actually going to make mention of this because I was wondering at the end of this, the lights went dark for a second. I thought, okay, maybe they thought about leaving stage for a sec. It kind of had that feel to it because it kind of sounded like there was a little bit more of a pause. And actually, if you look on the original set list, after Daughter, the set list is completely crossed out and replaced.
Yeah.
So I think Ed just addresses his guitar during this while there's a little bit of a pause and says the fucking piece of shit works. And this is a song about getting your ass kicked, I know from personal experience. So a lot of these songs that they're playing at the end here, they kind of mapped out, which is very cool, kind of mapping out on the fly and figuring out what you have to do. And maybe that this moment was a little bit of that. Maybe it was a little bit of figuring a guitar, and maybe it was kind of directing the set list, being like, all right, let's switch that around. Maybe it was that. Yeah. So that's where we get very good versions of both Whipping and Lucan. Very intense back-to-back pop punk rock songs. Whipping just has a lot of charge and intensity, and it's been, at this point, a handful of songs since you've heard a Vitalogy song, so Vitalogy can feel fresh again. Another one of the great consistent things that he's done in the set list to just balance the songs, but you can also tell which ones they're super pumped up to play, and very interesting. Also, when you get into Lucan, it has that same kind of guitar screech to it that Whipping does.
Yeah, it does. And you get some original lyrics in there, too. It hadn't quite morphed into to being about Matt Lucan yet. There's still some other stuff in there. But
something about this is my home away from home.
Yep. It was getting there, but we hadn't quite gotten the full final lyrics yet. But you mentioned the set list. I'm looking at this. It after Daughter, it's Lucan, Whipping, Small Town, Satan's Bed, and Satan's Bed is blacked out. Then Rearview Mirror, then Satan's Bed again, so they thought about moving it later. Then Blood, and then but everything Lucan, Whipping, Small Town, Satan's Bed, Rearview Mirror, Satan's Bed is all crossed out. To the side, then it says Garden Alive, Whipping, Rearview Mirror, Small Town. So Lucan didn't even have, well, yeah, it's up there, but if it was crossed out and then it wasn't put back in, so that's just... I wonder
if that's just an off-the-fly decision.
That's just probably Ed going like, yep, here we go.
Fucking play it. Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. And again, that's preparing them for way later. That's another thing that's preparing them for way later, where they can know in the middle of the set, hey, this is going to work with this crowd and this is not going to work. And knowing what kind of version of Rearview Mirror that we're going to get after the kinds of versions of Whipping and Lucan that we're going to get Elderly Woman as the bridge into Blood is it's almost perfect in how they made that decision. The decision of it, and just how they were thoughtful enough to do that, to make that balance. That is one of the most interesting parts about that, because they don't even do stuff like that anymore. Like, how often have they played, like, third to the penultimate song, really make it feel like it's a closer, and then sort of take you down with a song like Elderly that's more acoustic and more softer, more sing-along, and then just kick your ass at the end again with a song like Blood. That kind of stuff doesn't happen. So
yeah.
Rearview Mirror, obviously, look, the song kicks up and you can tell he's distracted. Ed is distracted during this. He's singing the wrong lyrics, and before they're really able to gain some momentum, Ed is addressing two people in the front fighting.
Okay, stop for a sec. Hey, stop for a sec. Come on, you guys, what the fuck are you having a fight for? You're in the middle of a rock and roll concert. Fucking peace and love, right? Sorry, everybody, way in the back, way in the front. There's a couple knuckleheads right up here that need to be taken care of. Of course, remember where the banner starts right.
1, 2, 3, 4, they kick right back into the chorus, and it's back to Jack. It's back to Jack on this. The fills from Jack versions just so much different from what the other guys do, and Stone's playing a little bit off Ed's vocals, and then time to really take it down a little bit. And the night before was totally quiet and almost as if the song stops, but this one kind of stops a little bit, but then gets into this Who-inspired riff just as the bottom drops out, just as they get into the big moment. He lays off the big scream, shows a little bit more control on it. I don't know if it was a complete miss or what, but the ending does feel big regardless.
It's very good, and it's almost a shame that Knuckleheads had to get involved, because this is up there. I mean, we talked about on the night one about how you almost never get that now, where Rearview Mirror gets super quiet, and this one starts to go there, but then that triumphant part comes in, and it's just Jack and Mike. Oh, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. One of the highlights.
Yeah, Rearview Mirror was not one of those that they kept off the set list for Jack. It was one of them that they made sure was on the set list every single night. That's the reason why. So like I mentioned, Elderly Woman is kind of the bridge between these two, which is very interesting. You know, having to pace yourself and having to, Rearview Mirror into Blood, while, yes, awesome, and you get all of that angst and anger out all kind of at once, they're saying, no, you know what? Let's kind of soothe things out before doing that, and then Blood will be 10 times more impactful, which I felt was true out of this.
Yeah, Small Town is interesting because, nowadays we're used to Stone starting on the guitar, but this is Ed playing the electric guitar, starting it, and this is the one that gets quiet. This is a very unique Small Town. We don't get a lot of them with this kind of feel to it. I thought it was really interesting. It wasn't like a folky version. It wasn't like a Springsteen version or kind of a rocking version. It was somewhere in the middle. It was very
Yeah, I thought it had little hints of being anthemic, but also the crowd was singing along to it. So it was just good rhythmic. It was just a good rhythmic balance, It had a good vibe to it, a good feel to it.
Another one that just has that 95 edge to it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Where, you can tell they're playing something that they want to impact the crowd a different way, but however, it's something that still has 1995 identity to it. So he's addressing the crowd and kind of playing up that, hey, thank you everybody for being here, and says from Red Rocks to Morrison to Denver to Montana to New York to South Dakota, North Dakota, we love playing music and we had a great time the last 2 nights. Thanks a lot. And then Blood. And this is exactly why we couldn't get it played the night before, because I don't think Ed, at this point in the set the night before, was going to be able to pull this off, because boy, was this a 1995 version of Blood or what? Just timing out his big jumps before the last chorus and making it just a stage presence, singing the enemies line, enemies, 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 over and over and over again. and it looks like he's gonna take the mic stand. He wants to smash it. He sees a balloon. He's trying to smash it on the balloon, and it comes back and hits him in the face. So definitely some very cool things happening with blood. I thought that this was definitely a good, probably a highlight of the night.
Yeah, it's like borderline psychotic, which is a good thing.
Especially for 1995, which is psychotic in his own right. So, a little bit later than usual, but we're at the encore here. So let's pause for station identification. We only have 4 more songs left, but hey, what better time to do it than right now? And like we mentioned throughout this whole entire episode, on Patreon right now, patreon.com/live-on-4legs, or the Patreon app, you search for Live on 4 Legs and you see us. If you know what our logo looks like, you will see us. And that's where you will get night 1. If you've been listening to this the whole time, haven't listened to night 1 stuff, then hey, you can go out of order. I didn't say you couldn't go out of order. I just said maybe you would like to listen to the first one first. And they were posted at the same exact time. So if you're listening to this right when we posted this early in the morning on Wednesday, then you can go right to Patreon and you'll be able to get the same thing. You'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see it right there, and it'll be right there for the taking for you. So we had a lot of fun with that episode as we had for this one. Let's talk a little bit about it. For those who haven't joined up before, maybe are interested in joining up, let's talk a little bit about the tiers and what you can get out of it. John, take it away.
Yeah, I want to do that, but first I want to mention something that I, sometimes I think gets overlooked, and the fact that, like, yeah, Patreon is, you do have to pay for it, and like there's this content that you're paying for. And a lot of people might feel strange, like, oh, why do I have to give them like money? Like I don't want to give them money for that. But I just want to make it clear that like all the Patreon money that we're getting from our patrons is that's not going into our pockets. We're not like taking vacations with that. We're putting it back into the show. We're using it for the website that we're doing. It all goes back to the show. It just makes us want to do more and more stuff for you guys. Where it's going to allow us to go really big when the tour comes back, whether it's later this year or next year or whenever. We're going to be able to use the generosity of our patrons and do some really cool things. But I just want to let you know that that's been because a lot that's like a hesitation for some people. Like, hey, why should I have to give them money for this? But you're not giving us money; it's all going back into the show. So I just wanted to make that clear. We almost never talk about that, but
and because you guys do and are kind enough to give us a donation out of your pockets, that's why we try to do our best to give you guys more.
Exactly.
We try to make sure that there's something on Patreon almost every week, and if there isn't, then we make it up to you way later and put more on. If we had a week where we didn't do anything at all, so yeah it's just all trying to get back to you guys, and we're at 100+ patrons right now that are freaking awesome that continue to donate, and it's very cool because at this point last year we weren't anywhere close to that, so it's just amazing to see the growth and amazing to see how many people have taken an interest in this, and John is completely right. When the tour comes back up, a lot of our funds will be going into trying to get out there and throw some events and things like that. So there are things in the making, and hopefully we'll be able to get to them whenever we get an announcement. But let's give you a little bit of information on the tiers if you guys just so happen to be interested in joining.
Yeah, so we mentioned, just for $1 a month, that's the bonus leg tier. You get access to all the bonus content that we do, all the extra episodes, the Devo episodes, like I talked about. We did that one on the Lost 1995 album where we went through and dug up some improvs and took some things that were written around the time and kind of put this album together, and it kind of had a cohesive theme, and that was really cool, and we kind of do some fun stuff over there. We do the Evolution episodes, which we just did Hard to Imagine. That was really cool. We're going to be doing Given to Fly coming up over the summer, and that's going to be a really good one, so you get access to those. We're going to be finishing up our Bridge School series. We got one more left. You can go back and listen to all the episodes that we've done about the Bridge School series with all the unique songs and performances there, and like all that stuff just goes on and on. All the exclusive audio content is there for you. Plus, voting in all the polls, and we just post random stuff up there sometimes and updates. So all that's there for you. For $5 a month, we have the Giggle Leg tier, where if there's like a show that you went to or a show that you think we need to cover, maybe an underappreciated show in the history, there are some that we haven't heard that we don't know about. And if you think there's like a hidden gem out there that you'd like us to cover, you can upgrade to the $5 tier and you can suggest a show for us to cover. You could even come on the podcast and talk about it with us. And those are always great. We've been trying to knock out a lot of those this year. We've had a lot of Patreon request episodes, and those are always great because we didn't come up with those. We didn't find those. You guys did, so that we love that. And then also we have the $10 tier, and you're getting everything from the $1 and $5 tiers, all the exclusive episodes. You still get to pick an episode, but for $10 a month, those are the people that are helping us out with our website project, the Live on Four Legs Concertpedia. We called it the Horizon tier as a nod to Five Horizons, of course. And those are the people, you're going to get like an executive producer credit on the website. You can come on and we'll do a profile episode on you where we can talk about your fandom and your history with the band, live and otherwise. And so that's it. And it's recommended. You always say jump in on the $1 tier, see if you think it's worth it. And then if you want to get in it from there, you're in it from there. So yeah, our patrons amazing. We thank all of them, our once, present, and future patrons.
Yeah, just great to have everybody be a part of this, and again, 100 plus people. That was a goal that wasn't really a goal. That was just kind of an afterthought. And when we saw that would be a possibility, we got very excited, and we just know that the possibilities with this community are endless, especially when we're able to go out on tour and do stuff. Like that's really where we can get to engage with you guys and get to be more of what this podcast really wanted to be, and that's just having a presence wherever we go. So more on that whenever we do our See Here Now stuff, which is obviously coming when that event is coming, but there is stuff coming for that. So all right, let's get back into the rock here. Black starts out our encore, and unlike the night prior, Black isn't being used as kind of a cool down song. They're actually able to make it a highlight, let it stand out a little bit more, have it, they're not gassed during it. They didn't just go through 13 straight songs and completely, run through them like a runaway train. Like, they're able to let this breathe. They're able to let the strong points of the song are able to show. And, we get a little bit of a We Belong Together tag in it, and it's kind of, it's not the We Belong Togethers that we get nowadays where they kind of set it up. It's just during the solo, and it's kind of the same way that they would do it in 92 and 93 kind of deal, and very, very, very good. Even just the three songs that we're getting in this encore are just interesting to see in the order that they are. But, the way that the band is trying to pick them, they're just trying to, again, throw things on the wall, see what works, and I like this.
Yeah, I think of it as like a little bit of a reward. Like, you think about the beginnings, like, oh, we're going to be here for a while. And, like, you think of it, like, from the band's perspective. Like, we're going to make them sit through this, like, seated part, which we don't usually do, and we're going to play this weird stuff. And then they're going to sit through, 20 songs. So they deserve a little bit of, we'll play something that and we'll go back to the old days, and Black wasn't a hit, but it's the crowd favorite. So yeah, this version of Black is very, very good. Not surprisingly, the We Belong Together is fantastic. When that came in, like you mentioned, like it doesn't have the big setup like you get nowadays where it gets real quiet and then it starts, but yeah, very, very good. And again, I was transfixed watching it. Fantastic.
Porch, night one. If you listen to the night one episode, we talked about how Porch was very strange. It was different. It was another thing that was just deconstructed and completely changed. However, Mike wastes no time getting into this one, and he just holding out those notes just kind of testing himself a little bit. And man, underrated thing about 1995 Mike is that he is drastically improved as a guitarist from the earlier years. You can tell how much more in control that he is at this point, and you have to think, he's clean at this era. Like this is a clean, clear-minded Mike. In
wearing that Addict shirt.
Right, and the night before he was wearing a Bad Religion shirt. Like, in 1994, you can go back to the SNL taping where he was so fucked up he didn't remember playing Daughter, like that. And now, a year later, almost exactly a year later, things have completely turned around, and you can tell that he's more with it, that he knows what he's doing, that he's kind of ready to be on this stage and feels appropriate there.
Yeah, it's interesting too because we did the Neil Jam show, and we talked about kind of watching him kind of play, not second fiddle, but kind of play back up to Neil, and like watching him and like not grabbing the spotlight from Neil. I think this was a big time for him. And Mad Season 2, you can't underestimate that, playing with Lane and those guys had to have been a confidence builder for him. So yeah, he was. This is a good year for Mike. Absolutely a time of transition. And yeah, Porch is really good. Again, very good, unsurprisingly.
Here's the thing with Porch. We usually talk about this bridge.
Yeah.
I think we just got to talk about how explosive the ending is, because we don't ever get into how prominent of an ending this song is and how big of a moment it becomes.
Porch in 1994, 1992, 1993, 1994 was the showstopper, right? That was the 10-minute, 12-minute version where he's jumping, climbing up the rafters, and it's all nuts, and
it's a show,
fast, and he's super fast. Like, let's play it as fast as we can, and tearing like Rollins Band tags and all that stuff. But this is definitely not that. They were getting a little weirder on it, which fits 1995 perfectly.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just a really, really explosive way to end the song, and it gives you just this euphoric feeling of just like the band and crowd there singing at the top of their lungs together, doing it together. It's one of those songs that, it kind of is a celebration of life in a way, like kind of how Alive is, and where everybody can kind of come together and get that same kind of feeling from it. It brings that out of everybody, and especially it being another 10 song from this, and obviously the crowd, you're always going to get crowds that are hung up on 10 songs and that are always going to go back to that record, so it makes an impact, absolutely. But
you mentioned a celebration of life. It's almost like it could be a celebration of a goal.
Hey, that actually works, because we've been doing a little campaign. I don't know if you listened to the last episode, but at the end of the episode, we played a little goal song that we want the Seattle Kraken to be paying attention to, because we would like the Seattle Kraken to use Porch as their goal song. At Play Porch 4, the number 4 goals. on Twitter, and that's what you can follow to get in touch with the campaign, to keep up with it and see what we're doing. We've already gotten in touch with some pretty important people that might be able to make an impact on this, so hang tight on that. Hopefully we'll be able to get more, but yeah, that would be a fantastic goal celebration. Porch usually is going to end your set, however, it's kind of flip-flopped here, reversed, and you get Immortality instead. And I think Immortality was used as a set closer, or at least an encore closer at one of the Piss Bottle Men shows, and it sounded really, really good, and this one's no different. But Mike is just waiting. Mike is just waiting for this, and you can just feel it. Like, even in the verses, you can hear there's little plucks from Mike. He's just like, I just want to get into it. I just want to get it out.
Doing those harmonics, yeah.
Once they burst into the solo section, he just holds it out for an eternity and really lets it go.
This is the showstopper of this. Like, this Immortality is the showstopper, because it's that moment when, like, there's that half second before he starts that solo where you're like, oh, here we go.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's everything you want it to be. And I think there's a moment too. I don't know that we've seen them do this a lot, where they all go up to the front row and play.
Yeah, that was very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the night before, they actually kind of did the thing where they hovered around Jack during the outro of that. And what I thought was really cool, and it was unintentional with the visual, but like the way that the lighting was on Jack made him kind of look like a white silhouette back there. And then all four guys that were in front playing towards the crowd. It's an incredible visual, and probably outside of, like, just seeing them playing a sit-down set, like, one of the most powerful of the night. I agree with you. That was fantastic.
Just another amazing performance and a night of amazing performances.
Right. Yeah, you can't do any wrong. Absolutely. And they're going to leave. They're going to come back. There's going to be a one-song second encore, and that's going to be for Indifference. So Ed says one for the road here. And it's in complete darkness. You don't see any of the mountains, any of the cliff behind them, and most of the show is in complete darkness. They don't do much of a light show at the time. There are these little things that are on the amplifiers. They look like plants or something like that, and they're illuminated a little bit, but you don't really see too much else, especially during Indifference. But big moments, the I'll Swallow Poison line elevates the song. Crowd really loves it. And, the two songs that you get normally to end sets back to back in these shows are ending your night, and it's funny to see how, while things change, some things just stayed the same. And Indifference and Yellow Ledbetter have pretty much, from 1995 on, have been the standard bearer closing songs.
Yeah, and Indifference is kind of the unsung closer, right? It's not the one that's the big, party moment, but it's like the cool older brother one. This is like kind of a moodier, kind of like more interesting kind of show. And Indifference is perfect for this. I don't think Yellow Ledbetter fits this show. I think it had to be Indifference, and it's very, very good. really cool way to end it.
There's synergy to it too, because you start off the night sort of different and unique and sitting down, and then Jeff is sitting down playing the upright on this, and it has that kind of same vibe. Even though the other guys are standing up, it has that same vibe of kind of going out the same way you came in,
full circle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the things that unintentionally makes the show very, very interesting and very, very good. So now we come to one of the hard parts. Not probably the harder part than the ranking, but why don't we try it? Why don't we try giving 3 moments for this?
Can I pick 20? Like, this is...
I mean, they can just go back and re-listen to the episode if you want to do that.
Yeah, the whole episode's been a moment, but I'm going to have to leave out some that I absolutely love. You have to do No Jeremy. That's going to be my number 3.
You have to do No Jeremy. I don't have to do
it.
Since you did it, I might not do
it. Speaking for myself, the way that it started and knowing what they know that the crowd didn't know. It's, Ed loves those moments where, like, he knows something you don't know. And, like, this is Jeremy, and then you get that moment. And, yeah, like, we talked about it, like, I didn't think it was perfect. It didn't work lyrically, I thought, as well as it does musically, but it's just so important for what it was. And again, immortalized on that fan club single from 2010, just amazing. My number 2 is Corduroy. Just a jaw-dropping version of Corduroy. Everything we talked about, unbelievable. And I'm going to go back to the B-side of that Christmas single for number 1, Falling Down. Has to be.
You can't go wrong with any of those. And I think I'm going to go to number 3. I'm going to say Blood. Blood was just very intense and brought, an intensity that maybe you weren't going to get at the end of the set the first night because they were just kind of blowing themselves out, kind of blowing a tire. But it's a classic version of Blood. I'm also gonna go with... I'm having a hard time here.
Not a bad answer.
Yeah, I really like the Whipping Lucan back-to-back. I really like the Whipping Lucan back-to-back here. It just had kind of coming off alive at this intensity where you're thinking, oh, well, this is the end of the set, right? And nope, they zip you right back into it. I thought that was a perfect way to do it. And Lucan being a little bit different than it usually had been known to be played later, I thought was very interesting from this time. So yeah, that was a really good back-to-back combo. And then I can't disagree with you. Falling Down is the moment. That's the one that sticks out from this show, and you're never going to get it again. So I'll never get an opportunity to say that again, to make it my number 1. And had they played it other times, yeah, maybe I would have chosen it as my number 1. But it's just something completely different and something completely unique, and makes this show just like No Jeremy. And even though I didn't put No Jeremy in my top 3, it's represented here. So that's what's important. And I think for a show like this, it is better to try to fill the map out a little bit because there are so many good moments. So that's what we try to do. But No Jeremy can't be discounted either. But Falling Down is for me easily the number 1 moment.
Yeah, so I think this is a big reason that a lot of people are anticipating that 1996 to 1999 box set, because it turned into a song called Fallen. If you go look in your Lost Dogs liner notes, you can see it on the reels there. There's a title called Fallen. And I think a lot of people are holding out hope that we will finally get to hear that on that box set. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Give the show a 10, just, because it deserves it.
8 Vitalogy songs, 7 Versus songs, 3 OTOTOs. Yeah, it's 10, absolutely. One of the top 50 shows of their career, if not much, much higher.
There's no argument here, and I think it's even 10 for even different reasons. It's again, kind of going back to what I said very early in this episode. It's kind of the table setter for other shows that did things like this and that made those shows even more important. This was an experiment before the experiment, and even just with the set list construction, it was just different than the night before and different than most of 1995, and it's really going to show that their shows are going to have more depth to them, that they're going to have more staying power, and they're going to have more emotional big moments later in their set than they had earlier in their career. So I give the show a lot of credit for the formation of all that.
It lives up to the hype. It's everything
100%.
It's everything you want it to be.
Absolutely. So all right. If you didn't listen to the first episode, then that's over on Patreon. Go ahead, head over there, patreon.com/live4legs. And I guess next week, next week's going to be big because we're going to do Rome 2018. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a sabbatical. I'm going to go on paternity leave after next week because, well, that should speak for itself. So John, you're gonna after next week, you're gonna have some new guests on, and you're gonna take over. You're gonna anchor the show here, and July should be very interesting. But before we get into July, we're gonna do Roma 2018, which is obviously a very big
Modern
show for
classic.
the era. So we're going out big, and then once I come back, I know the show that I'm coming back to, so I'm very excited when I come back. Is going to be something really, really big. All right, we'll see you next week for Rome. This may be the end. We're here, but not for much longer, and although we may be parting ways, we miss you already. We miss you always. Thanks for tuning in, and if you aren't subscribed on any of the platforms, wherever you're listening, are you listening on Spotify or Apple or SoundCloud or Stitcher? It could be anything. It doesn't matter. Just make sure you're subscribed because you just never know when we're going to pop in and give you another episode. Or, hey, you get busy with life and maybe you forget that our episodes come out on Wednesday. And maybe you just need that little pop-up to tell you, hey, Live on Four Legs episode is out. And then you can be like, all right, I'm saving that for my ride home from work. And that's all you need to just figure out the rest of your day. If you don't have that, then you're not going to know what other big stuff is coming down the line, because we got some great shows that are coming the rest of the summer and even further after that. So more and more stuff keeps going on and on and on. And if you give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, then we will give you a shout out on the show. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll be back Rome next week. See you then.
How could they make such a fuss over this boy?
I will swallow poison until I grow immune. I will scream my lungs out till it fills this room. We love you.